observe from the chamber. We begin with questions to the Secretary of State for Energy, Security and Net Zero, Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Number one, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State is unwell and sends her apologies both to you and to the House. And with your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll take questions 1 and 11 together. Ministers in the department meet regularly with Ofgem to discuss a range of issues, and the Secretary of State met suppliers alongside Ofgem in November to discuss consumer energy debt and the protection of vulnerable customers. And I know many families are struggling with their energy bills this winter, and that's why we are providing cost of living support worth £104 billion between 2022 and 2025.
Martin Docherty-Hughes.
I'm grateful for that answer, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just a few days ago, the Office of National Statistics showed that the number of households who've been unable to pay their energy bills has increased by nearly 40%. Does the Minister, on behalf of the Secretary of State, who I hope gets better soon, accept that the UK Government's failure to listen to stakeholders such as Citizens Advice, who were calling for the £400 energy bill to be reinstated, has led to soaring levels of energy debt among those who can least afford it, like my constituents in West Dunbartonshire?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He's right to highlight the issue of debt and families who are struggling. That is why we've provided the £104 billion, or £3,700 per household on average over 2022 to 25. It's one of the most generous packages in Europe. And in the autumn statement, we increased the national living wage, which is worth £1,800 to a full-time worker, and increased benefits by 6.7%, which is worth £470. And just last week, we delivered a tax cut for 27 million people, worth £450 for the average worker. So we are taking steps, but we recognise the reality for many people that the honourable gentleman set out.
Douglas Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my country, energy debt is rising as Scottish consumers pay a premium on their energy bill. It's a high price to pay to keep the lights on in England. In light of this imbalance, though, has the Minister discussed the abolition of the not-for-purpose Ofgem? And if not, shouldn't his government give full responsibility, or give full responsibility for energy pricing in Scotland to the Scottish Parliament?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, of course, we have moved decisively to support families in Scotland and across the rest of the UK. I'm pleased that the price cap has fallen by half since its peak last year, and we are making sure that our support is targeted at the most vulnerable. And I've already laid out many of the measures that we're taking precisely in order to ensure that the people in Scotland and elsewhere are supported in what's been a tough time. But of course, overall, we're looking to power up Britain. We've set out a plan to do so precisely in order to have more of our power coming from Britain and remove our dependence on foreign fossil fuels. And I hope the honourable gentleman and his party will support us in our efforts to deliver that.
SNP spokesman Dave Doogan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The situation for bill payers this winter is even worse than it was last winter, and that's why the SNP have called for the reinstatement of the £400 energy support scheme. But the government stubbornly refused to sufficiently stand by householders freezing all over these islands, despite increased hospitalisation and a report of doubling of burns from hot water bottles in Scotland. So how will the Tories extend just a fraction of the interest they've shown in exploiting Scotland's natural energy resources to the people of Scotland freezing yet again this winter?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and as I've set out in response to his colleagues, we have acted decisively. It's among the most generous support of any nation in Europe, and we can be proud of the efforts that we've made, and I'm pleased to see that the energy price cap, as I say, is down so significantly.
Kevin Foster.
Question number 2, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And with your permission, I will answer question number 2, 7 and 14 together. Last week, I announced the biggest expansion of nuclear power for 70 years. We will deploy a fleet of small modular reactors and build up to 24 gigawatts of nuclear by 2050. This will ensure we have reliable, cheap and low-carbon power to protect consumers from price volatility and hostile foreign regimes bolstering our energy security.
Kevin Foster.
Well, I thank the Minister for his answer. You know, the new civil nuclear roadmap is a welcome step in growing our nuclear sector and potentially creating jobs all across the United Kingdom, from the north of Scotland to the southwest peninsula, and including sites like Wiltshire. What assessment of the economic impact has he, for the southwest region, has he made of the potential growth of the nuclear sector, particularly given the nuclear expertise at sites like Devonport and Hinkley Point?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He's absolutely right. The nuclear sector supports jobs across our entire United Kingdom, and it would be very welcome if governments across this United Kingdom were to come together and champion that industry as it grows over the next few decades. The nuclear sector is vitally important to the economy of the southwest of England, as he knows, providing up to 11,000 jobs in construction alone at Hinkley Point C, and will go on generating high-wage, high-skilled jobs for generations as we continue to build up this important part of our energy security.
Bob Blackman.
Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his answer. And indeed, the announcement of the nuclear roadmap. Small modular nuclear reactors can bring energy to our towns and cities across the country very quickly. They're under development right now. When can we see the first one actually installed and providing power to the grid?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he will be pleased to know that we're bringing forward small modular reactors, and that the next phase of the live SMR competition will launch within weeks. Our aim is for the competition to be the fastest of its kind in the world, to help facilitate final investment decisions into projects in the next Parliament and operational projects here in the UK by the 2030s. Launch will mark a significant step forward for the eligible companies and for the UK's broader nuclear ambitions.
Giles Watley.
Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his answer. Now, having over the decades given away the massive advantage this country had with the Calder Hall development in 1956, can my honourable friend reassure me that we will again regain that ground by pushing for more rapid development of a sensible nature, as the Finns have with their hole in the ground for storing nuclear waste? And can he inform the House with which nuclear vendors the department is engaging?
Well, I very much thank my honourable friend for that question. He's absolutely right, referencing the proud history that we have in this country when it comes to civil nuclear. The developments at Calder Hall really did lead the world, and referencing what is happening in Finland right now with deep geological disposal. The plans in our nuclear roadmap will quadruple the nuclear capacity by 2050, and we're making rapid progress on both Sizewell C and the SMR competition. And we continue to work closely with countries such as Finland, who I engage with regularly, who have built large-scale operate a geological disposal facility and signed up to the COP pledge to triple nuclear capacity.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Government's commitment to SMRs, which I think are the way forward for the future of nuclear. Sheffield Forgemasters, of course, is ideally placed to produce the essential parts for those reactors, and has got memorandum of understanding with both Rolls and with Hitachi. Will the Minister meet with the Mayor of South Yorkshire, Forgemasters and others in a consortium where there's now access to significant development capital so we can actually build the SMRs in South Yorkshire, which will really create the thousands of well-paid jobs that we want, as well as the green energy?
I thank the honourable gentleman for the question. I would be delighted to meet the Mayor of South Yorkshire. One of the things we are committed to achieving through this nuclear roadmap is not only ensuring our energy security and a further drive towards our net zero objectives, but building up the supply chain and creating those high-wage, high-skilled jobs at all levels across the United Kingdom. So, of course, I'd be delighted to meet with the Mayor of South Yorkshire and indeed anybody else who represents an area who wants to invest in this future and this great exciting moment in nuclear capacity.
Tim Farron.
Deputy Speaker, I'm also in favour of new nuclear. I think it's an important part of a balanced green energy mix. But does the Minister share my concern that much of the investment in new nuclear in the UK is coming from overseas companies and even the governments of overseas countries? Given the emphasis is not just on reducing carbon emissions, it's also about energy security. Is he not concerned about that? Would he also maybe consider other forms of renewable energy, such as tidal power, where the entire supply chain is British and would be great for our economy as well as for tackling climate change?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question, and it couldn't be. I do hold a contrary position. I'm very proud of the fact that this country is open to inward investment, and indeed attracts attention from some of the biggest companies in the world in investing in our future energy security and our net zero objectives. But of course, in doing so, in unveiling all these exciting announcements as we did last week, at the heart of what we're seeking to achieve is creating those high-wage and high-skilled jobs as we move forward across the whole United Kingdom, building up that supply chain, and of course, tidal is going to be an important part of the mix moving forward as well.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank the Minister for that answer. By the way, it's most progressive. It is clear that the progress made in nuclear safety and the need for clean energy would indicate that government must invest in the security of this sector, which would lower energy costs and help us to meet our green targets, which we all want to meet and all should meet. Will the Minister outline what progress has been made to secure this investment? Thank you so much.
Well, as the honourable gentleman knows, just last week we unveiled our civil nuclear roadmap, and I committed to meet with him and indeed anybody else from Northern Ireland to seek to build up the manufacturing and supply chain workforce in Northern Ireland so that all parts of our United Kingdom can benefit from this once-in-a-generation investment that we are making right now.
Duncan Baker.
Question number 3, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The environmental impact of onshore wind farm cables is assessed through the consenting process. Minimising potential environmental impacts of new infrastructure is a government priority, and we're committed to ensuring new electricity networks projects mitigate environmental impacts at every opportunity.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I'm a huge supporter of offshore wind, there is no doubt about it that the trenching through my beautiful countryside is not without bringing its own set of problems. Flooding, agricultural runoff, pollution has all been hugely exacerbated since the summer with what has happened in North Norfolk. So, Minister, what measures do we really have to be able to force the wind companies to clean up the countryside and repair it after the damage it causes when they trench through it?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question and for his persistent raising of issues around this, making sure that we get the transmission infrastructure we need, but do so in a way which has the minimum negative impacts on his constituents and others. And I will follow up, following his question today, to look in specifically at the regime and make sure that the companies concerned not only go through all the correct permissioning ahead of time, but are also properly followed up to ensure that they deliver it in a way which doesn't leave the problems which he's itemised.
Shadow Minister Dr. Alan Whitehead.
Madam Speaker, on the subject of onshore wind, on the 28th of November, I asked the Minister how many planning applications in England for onshore wind had been lodged since the alleged loosening of planning restrictions on onshore wind in September. The answer then was 0. Even now that the policy has had some more time to bed down, the answer, I'm afraid, is still 0. And I predict it will be 0 the next time we meet. In September of last year, the Secretary of State said that the changes made in September, and I quote, will help speed up the delivery of onshore wind projects. Does the Minister think they've succeeded?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. As you'll be aware, in the last CFD round, a great deal of onshore wind was successfully brought forward, and it still constitutes the largest single form of renewable energy. I think my honourable friend will correct me if I get it wrong, in the United Kingdom. But I share with the honourable gentleman a frustration at making sure that we see that pulled forward so that we see more projects in England as well as the rest of the UK.
Dr. Alan Whitehead.
You can do something about this frustration.
Well, I'm glad the Minister is actually frustrated about the complete failure of this policy alleged turnaround. But I'm very frustrated because if we hadn't had this absurd ban in the first place, onshore wind development that would have taken place already would have saved every family £180 on their energy bills. So all we are suggesting on this side is that onshore wind is treated like any other development. How long will it be before the Minister accepts reality and concludes that he needs to go back and properly repeal the ban?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and his personal commitment in this area, but he knows as well as anyone that the parlous performance of the previous government that his right honourable friend was a leading figure in, less than 7% of our electricity, less than 7%, came from renewables as recently as 2010. It is this government which has led the world after a flatlining in carbon emissions from our electricity sector under Labour, a flatlining. We have led the world, and we will see, we've seen renewables grow, and we've seen coal. We will see, by October of this year, we will see coal entirely removed from our mix.
SNP spokesman Dave Doogan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. New renewable energy generation demands new transmission infrastructure, and this government has been asleep at the wheel for 14 years, showing zero pace, ambition or grip in delivering that energy infrastructure, and that's why bills are so high. But nevertheless, we are where we are. But can the Minister confirm for the record to the House today what National Grid have said, and that is that UK government policy is that when constructing new transmission infrastructure, overhead lines are the starting position?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. And of course, we've been moving at pace. We've had the Windsor Review, we've had the Connections Plan, we had in the autumn statement, and indeed the Prime Minister's speech in September, so much to drive forward and change the transmission infrastructure from a 14-year timeline to halving that to 7. We are absolutely working flat out, but it should be noted that the reason that overhead lines are preferred is the cost of undergrounding. Not only is it in fact vastly disruptive, as my honourable friend has referred to, either undergrounding or offshore is 5 to 10 times, and sometimes even more than that, expensive than having overhead infrastructure. And that is why it is the starting presumption in order that we can deliver a low cost. We want to power Britain from Britain. We want to do it at a low cost manner so that when we get to the 2030s and we've decarbonised our electricity system, we have a low cost electricity system as well, while making sure that we do install the infrastructure in a way which is friendly and supportive to communities.
Liz Twist.
Question 4, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Government remains focused on providing help where people need it most. We are already providing a package of support totalling over £104 billion, or £3,700 per household on average over 2022 to 2025.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, last year, the Government promised action on helping the most vulnerable with their energy bills. And in April 23, her predecessor said that a social tariff could be very helpful. Nearly a year on, we've heard absolutely nothing about a social tariff. Can the Secretary of State, can the Minister explain to the House why they've abandoned plans for a social tariff?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the honourable member will know, we are continuing our support for vulnerable households, and it's really important that we do bear how best we can help households. As an example, we have £900 in the cost of living payments, and we also have the warm home discount payment. Obviously, one of the things that we're doing is we're going to constantly monitor where we are and make sure that we continue to support all those vulnerable households.
Angus McNeil.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is indeed a need for a social tariff, and whether it's a cost of living crisis or a lack of wages crisis, given the Resolution Foundation reported at the beginning of December that average wages across the UK were £10,700 less than they should be, compared to other countries over the last 15 years, comparable countries. There probably is a lack of wages crisis in the UK, but regardless, the Energy Security Net Zero Committee, in our Preparing for Winter report, in paragraph 24, said we urge the Government and energy suppliers to consider implementing a form of social tariff and other measures to protect vulnerable households from being cut off from their energy supplies. This was a unanimous report, unanimous across Labour, Tory and, of course, the pro-Scottish Independence voice on the committee. But will we see some movement on this from the Government? It is important, it's needed by everybody, and it's particularly welcomed by my constituents in the Hill and Near.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And clearly, as I've indicated already, we are doing a lot of things to help people, including the most vulnerable in society. But also, it's worth pointing out in terms of the national living wage that we heard just recently announced in the autumn statement that it's going to be worth £1,800 for a full-time worker, with an increased benefit of 6.7%, which is worth £470 a year.
Yep.
Kate Osborne.
Question number 5, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 5, 15 and 18 together. Fuel poverty is devolved and statistics in England are published annually by the Department. The next English statistics will be published on the 15th of February, and these will include estimates of the number of households in fuel poverty in 23, 2 and 24.
Kate Osborne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just under a third of people in my constituency of Jarrow are now living in fuel poverty. Constituents like Maureen, who told me that she's struggling to find an extra £975 a month due to the disability price tag. This will be made worse by the recent news on the energy price cap rise. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wonder if the Minister can explain why do the government still insist on giving subsidies worth billions to the oil and gas industry through loopholes in the windfall tax? Wouldn't that money be better? Wouldn't it be better spent cutting people's bills?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I just want to point out the work that we have been doing in this government to help vulnerable people. Not only that, but we've halved energy bills. But also, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have constant meetings with all stakeholders, including citizen advice, all of the disabilities, and making sure that what we're doing is we are supporting all vulnerable people as a cost of living crisis and indeed as we go through this winter.
Beth Winter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm also seeing an increase in numbers of constituents with significant levels of energy debt and who are coming to our office seeking fuel vouchers. So can I ask the Secretary of State why the government is pursuing the offshore petroleum licensing bill, which she herself has said won't bring down bills, and economic forecasters warn delays in decarbonising will leave consumers with higher prices? Isn't it time the government dropped the focus on fossil fuels and delivered instead the public investment in renewable energy, which will bring down bills and will go some way to averting the climate catastrophe?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are absolutely committed, first of all, to helping vulnerable people, but also we are committed to make sure that we are giving the best energy security that we have. And that is why we are committed to all the policies that we have introduced.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I listened very carefully just now to the answer the Minister gave to my friend, the Honourable Member for Blaydon, but I'm still none the wiser, so I'll ask again. Can the Minister set out what recent discussions she has had with the Welsh Government about the social tariff that the previous Secretary of State described as very helpful?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So just to reiterate conversations that I have been having with all stakeholders, and when I say stakeholders, that doesn't just mean the Citizens Advice, it doesn't mean Disability UK, but of course it means across government, but also in different devolved departments.
Derek Thomas.
I'm sure the Minister will agree that energy security and supporting the most vulnerable in fuel poverty absolutely is hand in hand. But any way to address security is both about securing supply but also cutting waste. So can the Minister set out what the government is doing, what her department is doing, to reduce the waste of energy from people's homes?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I just want to acknowledge how hard the Honourable Member for St Ives works for his constituents. And of course, this is the things that we are most mindful of, making sure that we get energy efficiency in production, but also energy efficiency in the way that we use that energy.
Bill Estes.
Question 6.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I'll take questions 6 and 16 together. I meet regularly with business leaders, chair several groups bringing together government and industry so that we can drive progress towards net zero. That includes the Net Zero Council, which is meeting next week, and includes members from right across the economy. Like me, they are delighted that the UK is leading the world in tackling climate change. We are the first major economy to halve our emissions ahead of every other, and we have one of the most ambitious decarbonisation targets in the world going forward.
Bill Esterson.
Well, contrary to what the Minister has just said and what he said about onshore wind, in fact, this country has fallen to 7th in the world for attracting investment in renewables on his party's watch. Well-paid jobs, lower bills and economic growth will all follow, but only if we attract investment. So why is this government enabling what EY described as the diminishing of green policies and undermining the economic benefits of net zero?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, which has a sort of comic element, given the monumental failure of Labour to deliver renewables when they were in power, coupled with the fact that they want to bring forward this GB energy. They effectively, as his left-wing colleague has just said, public investment, drive out private investment, destroy the transformation of the UK energy system, which has happened under the Conservatives. And it is this part, it flatlined under Labour, and we have led the world, so we have now decarbonised more than any other major economy on the planet. And under our policies, under this Conservative government, which major economy in the world is predicted to decarbonise fastest by 2030? It's this one.
Yeah. Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if I may puncture the Minister's rant, I would like to ask him what certainty his government is going to give businesses, because we need a £23 billion combined investment from the public and private sector. But because targets have been missed, that will need to double or treble every year between now and 2050. And his Public Accounts Committee report that my comments are based on. So this chopping and changing on delivering what the government needs to deliver to get business to have the confidence to invest is a big problem. That's on his watch. Will he explain what he's doing to improve the situation?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question and for her work on the committee seeking to hold the government to account. Of course, we have realised £198 billion of investment into the clean energy since 2010, and our plans, which we have set out in Powering Up Britain, we have a plan. The party opposite only has an intention to borrow £28 billion a year, putting up families' taxes, putting up bills and destroying the most investable market in Europe which we've had to date. We will have another £100 billion of private investment by 2030 when the Conservatives carry on their work in leading the world in transforming our energy system so we have lower cost, home-produced energy while also delivering on net zero, things which singularly did not happen under Labour.
Dominic Raab.
Deputy Speaker, UK startup Nucleo and French startup Narea have just announced a partnership to promote small modular nuclear reactors. What support is the UK government providing, and what proportion of our energy mix does the Minister think that this kind of initiative can support?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his question. He's right. It's great to see excitement across the chamber to develop nuclear. It's just a shame that when it came to the secondary legislation to enable the business models, that Labour didn't support it. So they say one thing in one place and a different thing when it comes to making the laws of the land. But I'm pleased to say to my right honourable friend that under the Conservatives, the plan is to bring the jobs, the technology and the opportunity of small modular reactors to this country as part of an ambition of up to 25% of our electricity coming from nuclear by 2050.
Catherine Fletcher.
Madam Deputy Speaker, talking to businesses in South Ribble about achieving net zero, we've got businesses on Leyland Business Park exploring geothermal, but we also have the huge advantage of having the Howick Park substation bringing in offshore wind, bringing in onshore wind down from Scotland, also the North West and Welsh nuclear fleet. Does he agree with me that in the future businesses will look to site themselves where there is reliable and accessible cheap energy? And does he agree with me that South Ribble is well placed to take advantage of that in the future?
Honourable friend, and she's quite right to highlight the benefits and attractions of South Ribble and indeed of the wider UK economy, because it's not just that the areas that have those services will attract business within the United Kingdom. The truth is, by rewiring and leading the world in delivering a low-cost, low-carbon energy system, we can attract more investment from abroad, bring it in, and we can have a renaissance, not least in the north of England, but Wales, Scotland, all around the country as a result of the net zero policies, which uniquely this country is managing to lead the world on following so many years of Labour failure.
Caroline Lucas.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I apologise. The Minister will know that the Climate Change Committee has a key role in advising the government on its path to net zero, but he will also know that this government 18 months on from the resignation of Lord Doogan as chair of the Climate Change Committee, still hasn't announced a replacement, despite 60 applications for the role and several people already having been interviewed. So can I ask the Minister, is the government simply scared of having its record scrutinised, or are they simply determined to destroy any last shred of the UK's climate leadership? Can he tell us now when that proper selection will be announced?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. And given her lifelong passion for this subject, I find it extraordinary that she never, ever recognises the unique achievements of this country in halving emissions. I would have thought she would celebrate that. And on terms of the Climate Change Committee, Chair, as she will know, it's not a matter just for the UK Government. It has to, the appointment of the Chair of the Committee has to be agreed by the devolved administrations as well, and we are moving as quickly as we can to ensure that well, the best thing is that barristers know is don't ask a question unless you know the answer to the question already, because it might not suit you. But I would just say that we are moving as quickly as we can to make sure that we do have a chairman in place, and I share her belief that it's an important role and we want to have it filled as quickly as possible.
Simon Fell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the most effective ways we can hit our net zero targets is by delivering an effective carbon capture and storage industry. I was delighted to see the government make an announcement just before Christmas about the next round of that. The Morecambe Bay Net Zero project, based in my own constituency, could deliver a gigaton of storage of carbon, helping some of our most energy-intensive industries through this transition period. I wonder whether I might be able to invite my right honourable friend to come and visit.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm not the Minister who leads on carbon capture, utilisation and storage, so I may have just swerved at the visit, but I would, of course, always be delighted to talk to my honourable friend. And if I can lean on my colleague in the House of Lords who is responsible for that, I will let him know of my honourable gentleman's kind offer. And I share his enthusiasm by capturing the renewables around the UK, by converting that into low-cost electricity, and, as we're taking forward, hydrogen as well, and using the natural blessing of having so much carbon capture capability. We really can deliver this country the jobs and the opportunity and a low-cost energy system for the future. And I look forward to my honourable friend's continuing support.
Good. Shadow Minister Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having shared a border with the former member for Kingswood for 14 years, I know he was genuine in wanting what was best for his constituents. He knew a green transition would protect their jobs at Rolls-Royce and Airbus, would help the science park thrive, would bring opportunities for SMEs and the self-employed. That home insulation and clean energy would bring warmer homes to Warmley and Woodstock, lower bills to Bitton. He resigned because he'd lost all hope that this government would deliver on that. He was right, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, just to spell it out, because you do have to speak very slowly for the opposition front bench, we have cut our emissions more than any other major economy, and our plans and the expectation of the UN is we will continue to lead the world. That is leading the world, not talking about it, not promising to borrow 28 billion, put everyone's taxes, and then on a daily basis fluctuating. It's about delivery. We have delivered, and we will continue to do so, because if we... Madam Deputy Speaker, if you want to see the reality of Labour on energy, you only need to go to Nottingham, where they invested in Robin Hood Energy, which went spectacularly bust, a forerunner, perhaps, if there ever were to be a Labour government. And, of course, it's typical of Labour to reverse all the principles of Robin Hood. What all Labour do is steal from the poor in order to pay for the bailiff.
Matt Rodder.
Question number 8, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and with your permission, I would like to take question number 8 and 19 together. Because of our plan, half of homes now meet the government's 2035 EPCC goal, a significant jump from 14% in 2010. In 2010, low-cost measures were targeted with 960,000 installations. In 2022, funding shifted to high-cost measures benefiting low-income households and less efficient homes, resulting in approximately 200,000 installations last year.
Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I fear that the Minister may be referring rather too much to new build homes. The reality is that in 2010 there were 1.8 million insulation measures introduced into cavity walls, into lofts, and in 2022, in comparison, only 80,000. And that has left my constituents in Reading and Woodley, who mainly live in Victorian and 20th century homes, struggling with very, very high bills. So I would like to ask the Minister what he's going to do about that.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman did not acknowledge that we've moved from 14% to 50% because of the actions of a Conservative government. But to answer his question directly, we are allocating around £20 billion into clean heat and energy efficiency over this Parliament and next, which will benefit his constituents. This includes our Great British Insulation Scheme, worth £1 billion, which will deliver insulation measures to around 300,000 of the country's least energy-efficient homes, saving them £300 to £400 each year by March 2026.
Daniel Zyde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, can I echo the observations from my honourable friend from Reading East? I remember in 2008-9 working endlessly, long before I came into this place, with Cambridge City Council and energy providers on encouraging people in the city to take up home insulation schemes. Since then, we've seen precisely nothing. Nothing has been going on. Now, Labour's got a huge ambition for the future. What's their ambition?
I know mathematics is not a strong point for the party opposite, but I'll go over the cases again. 14% to 50% over the course of the last three parliaments, delivered by the actions of this Conservative government. We have a plan to continue to deliver for the least well-off in those homes which need more energy efficiency measures. And as I just said to his colleague, we are allocating £20 billion into clean heat mechanisms over the next parliament, and we're going to continue delivering for the British people.
Philip Holliber.
Thousands of new homes are being built across the Kettering constituency. What is my honourable friend doing, together with the Levelling Up Department, to decarbonise the future housing stock and improve energy efficiency in new build housing?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. We actually recently announced further details regarding the £6 billion extension that will be allocated from 2025 to 2028. This will support an extra 500,000 homes, prioritising those who need it most, but including new builds. And this is on top of up to support for 700,000 families to install improvements to the Great British Insulation Scheme and Energy Company Obligation by March 2026.
Imran Hussain.
Number 9, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have met with Ofgem and suppliers to reiterate my expectations that the new rules will be followed. Ofgem have announced that if a supplier wrongfully installs a prepayment meter, they will be expected to compensate their customers appropriately.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Forcing the installation of prepayment meters in the homes of some of our poorest and most vulnerable constituents is frankly a scandal. And whilst the government rightly paused these forced installations last year, some energy companies have now been allowed to resume this outrageous practice under a new rules regime that the Minister referred to that still faces many questions. Does the Minister think that in the middle of winter, in the week when we've seen temperatures drop dramatically, that we can trust energy suppliers who have a history of unscrupulous practices in force-fitting energy meters in the homes of vulnerable people to effectively self-regulate, and will they instead legislate to ban the scandalous forced installation of prepayment meters once and for all?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And acknowledging how awful it was that people had their homes broken into to force prepayment meters, there is also a place, Madam Deputy Speaker, for prepayment meters to enable people and support people out of debt. However, I would like to give the House my reassurance that I have scrutinised every single level of the prepayment meter now that we're going back to the reinforcement to absolutely ensure that we are not going to be doing all the scandalous practices that happened before.
Alan Cairns.
Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The North Sea is a mature basin and production will naturally decline in the coming years. This government is committed to supporting our oil and gas industry and the energy transition. That's why we have the North Sea Transition Deal and we introduced the Offshore Petroleum Licensing Bill. We want to protect investment, the 200,000 jobs supported by the sector, the tens of billions of pounds that come in taxes, as well as helping utilising the existing industry to deliver the wider energy transition.
Alan Cairns.
The government's actions to use gas and oil reserves in the UK for the smooth transition to renewable sources is important to our energy security, but also offers great employment and wealth prospects in the process. Is he aware that Offshore Energy UK published a workforce insight last year that highlighted that the number of people working in the sector could be increased by 50%? But in order for that to become a reality, the sector needs to be stable, it needs to be competitive. What commitment can my honourable friend offer to the stability and the competitiveness of the sector?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his question. He's absolutely right. This is a declining basin, and it's so important as we go through the transition that we don't lose the skills and the jobs of the people who are providing the oil and gas upon which we currently rely. No country is doing more to decarbonise than we are, but we will continue to use oil and gas for decades to come. And as our production falls even more quickly than our demand and even more quickly than is required globally, it's essential that we support the industry, send the signal that he suggested, and we rebut the attitude of the party opposite, which would destroy those jobs, lose the tax, and actually put up emissions.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the fact that belatedly the government has now accepted that despite its zero policies, that the oil and gas industry is important for the future in the United Kingdom. But does he recognise that in order to benefit from the oil and gas in the North Sea, which will be released by licenses, the new licensing regime, that we need to have refinery capacity? And there's been very little, if any, investment in refinery capacity because of the uncertainty of the future and the carbon taxes placed on it. When is he going to address that issue to make sure that we get the full benefit of the oil and gas which we extract from our shores?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman. Effectively, we're part of a European market. Most of the gas that we produce is consumed in the United Kingdom. Our oil, most of that is refined elsewhere in Europe and contributes to European and UK energy security as it is converted into product. So it is one joined-up market. For historical reasons, our refineries, we have refineries which are used predominantly for oil that comes from abroad as opposed to that which comes from the North Sea, because these are multi-decadal investments, and of course as part of a managed decline in demand we will see refinery capacity over time reduce. So I think we are doing absolutely everything possible to do this in the most sensible manner possible. It's just a shame that the party opposite would have us import more. They're all in favour of oil and gas jobs so long as they're not in the UK, and they'll bring in foreign imports on which we get no jobs, no tax and with higher emissions. It makes no sense. Only the right honourable gentleman could champion such an insane policy.
Alex Cunningham.
Number 12, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Chair of the APPG on carbon capture, utilisation and storage, the Honourable Member will know the Government has committed £20 billion to support early development of carbon capture, usage and storage, and up to £500 million for the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund to help industry decarbonise, with Phase 3 opening shortly.
Alex Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And yes, I welcome the investment in carbon capture. We just need to get on and make something happen there. Now, Teesside is home to some of the most energy-intensive industries in the country. But instead of attracting more of these industries, including primary steelmaking, we're seeing plants closed down and jobs lost because investors don't see any industrial strategy from the government. And high energy costs means it's cheaper to import many of the goods we have until now made at home. Why is the government content to see this managed decline rather than back the kind of strategy that will protect existing industries and drive investment and job creation?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's important to note that this government actually invests throughout the country with our levelling up agenda. But of course we have been investing as well in the steel industry, and we are mindful as well to ensure that we have those skills that will take us forward for the future requirements.
Shadow Minister Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Member for Stockton North was, of course, absolutely right. We have seen managed decline under this government. No coherent industrial strategy, total failure to get the grid connected where we need it, and different government departments giving mixed messages and complicated processes to access any support. And on top of all of that, our industry has to pay twice as much on their energy bills compared to their European competitors. A recent report by UK Steel said our steel producers have to pay £117 million more per year on electricity, forcing the government to deliver a subsidy through the supercharger, which in turn raises bills for everybody else. Instead of these short-term policies, isn't it time for Labour's industrial strategy, Labour's grid reform and Labour's mission to become a clean energy superpower so we can permanently cut bills for everyone, actually grow our economy and give Britain its future back?
The Son
will shine every day.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government has demonstrated its commitment to help across domestic and the non-domestic sector. However, this government also recognises the vital role the steel sector plays in our economy. And in fact, the 2021 Net Zero strategy reaffirms our commitment to continue to work with the steel industry on decarbonisation.
We now proceed to topical questions. Mary Kelly-Foy.
Question number 1, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is the first major economy to halve its emissions. And since the Prime Minister's speech in September, we've announced the £960 million Green Industries Growth Accelerator, helped to deliver the first global agreement to transition away from fossil fuels at COP28, acted to protect motorists from unfair prices at petrol stations, announced backing for 11 major projects to produce green hydrogen, and committed to the biggest nuclear expansion in 70 years. We have a plan. Our plan is working. It will get us to net zero. It will guarantee our energy security, and it will bring consumers and the British people with us.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
My constituents have told me they are no longer eligible to receive the warm home discount, which is, along with Ofgem's price increase, is making the cost of living even more severe in the city of Durham. So will the Minister meet with me to discuss this, and what, if any, discussions has he had with the Minister for Disabled People about the impact of fuel poverty on disabled people?
Thank the Honourable Lady for her question. Of course, we are providing targeted support for the most vulnerable through the Warm Home Discount, and I'm pleased to say that we've raised it to £150, and we've also extended it so it now reaches 3 million low-income households, giving them a rebate off their energy bill every winter.
Philip Hollimer.
Is one of the greenest constituencies in the country because the wind turbines and solar panels located in the constituency generate enough electricity to power all 45,000 homes. For the country as a whole, what percentage of our electricity was generated from renewables when the Conservatives came to power in 2010, and what's the percentage now?
Good question.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. He will be delighted to learn that renewable generation has actually increased five-fold for the period between 2010 and 2020, from a risable 26 terawatt-hours to 135 terawatt-hours. And that's 40 gigawatts of renewable energy has connected to Great Britain's electricity networks since 2010. Since 2010, the UK has seen more than a 500% increase in the amount of renewable electricity capacity to the grid, thanks to this Conservative government.
Shadow Secretary of State Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the last month, the former Prime Minister who legislated for net zero has condemned his oil and gas policy. His colleague, the former COP President, has accused the government of, I quote, not being serious, and the government's net zero czar has resigned his seat in disgust. Why does the Minister think that is?
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. As we have rehearsed, the UK is the first major economy to halve its emissions. It is the one delivering more going forward, and it's so important. It is so important on issues of oil and gas that we recognise that we will continue to need it for decades to come, and that the party opposite's policy will have the opposite. It will weaken British jobs, it will reduce taxes, it will put up emissions, and that is why we remain committed, working across society to ensure that we deliver it.
It's not just us who oppose his bill, it's his own side. He's lost an MP over it. I know he brought down the last government over fracking. He's trying to do it again with his new bill. And that's the reason that they've lost confidence. People see the hottest year on record, and they see a government backsliding on net zero. Isn't the truth that the Conservatives who know and care most about climate change no longer support this government?
Well, the right honourable gentleman would love to think that was the case, but of course the Conservative Party is united in driving this forward and in delivering, because we are powering up Britain from Britain, and we have taken ourselves from the abject position which so many of my colleagues have described today, left by the right honourable gentleman when he was in government. That's why we must not go back to it. It would put bills up, it would put emissions up, and it would stop us being the global net zero leader that we are.
Duncan Baker.
Speaker, the Prime Minister recently visited Bacton Gas Terminal in North Norfolk, home to a third of the UK's gas supply, and in the future, in the east of England, this could be an enormous hub for green energy production. So can the Ministers reassure me that they will continue to consider Bacton as the future home for CCUS technology, but also as a hydrogen hub for the future in the east of England?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I agree with him and the Prime Minister on the importance of Bacton, which, like all gas terminals across the country, has the potential to play a crucial role in our energy security, and the decarbonisation of these terminals is vital to deliver both economic growth and net zero. And the Hewitt field, 20 kilometres offshore from Bacton, was awarded a licence for carbon sea storage by the North Sea Transition Authority in 2023, and I hear his loud voice, which will be heard on these benches, to say that it could have potential to be a hydrogen hub as well.
Sarah Green.
Data released last year suggests that Britain has one of the largest queues of wind and solar capacity waiting to be connected to the grid in Europe. Can the Minister provide an update on what steps the Department is taking to reduce those waiting times?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady, and she's absolutely right to highlight this issue. At the autumn statement, we announced plans to halve the time it takes to build new critical power lines, as well as reducing average delays from 5 years to no more than 6 months. And the Connection Action Plan at the more local level will release more than 100 gigawatts of capacity and give powers to the system operator to terminate stalled projects. So we are, across multiple departments, but led by this one, seeking to deal with the issues which she rightly raises.
Sherilyn McCrory.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. AMP in Falmouth, in my constituency, has submitted an application to the Government for the FLOMIS funding in readiness to support the floating offshore wind project in English waters, the first floating offshore wind project in English waters. With government support, this could potentially supply electricity to 45,000 homes in Cornwall. The scheme is shovel-ready, pragmatic and deliverable, with huge support from local stakeholders, as well as being vital to further build the supply chain in the South West. Will my right honourable friend carefully consider this application alongside Department for Transport colleagues to help me deliver this for Cornwall, the South West and the Celtic Sea Cluster?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst it's incredibly encouraging to hear about what's happening at AMP Falmouth, as my honourable friend knows, the Floating Offshore Wind Manufacturing Investment Scheme is providing up to 160 million to support investment into UK ports. And whilst FLOMIS is still live, I'm afraid I'm not able to comment on individual applications.
Debbie Abrams.
Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, over 15% of families in my Oldham East and Saddleworth constituency live in fuel poverty, with a median energy efficiency score of just 65. How much of the 2019 General Election Manifesto pledge to spend £9.2 billion on improving energy efficiency has gone on retrofitting existing properties and not on new builds?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And this government has remained firmly committed to making sure that we new build and retrofit as well. So in terms of the actual figure, I have to write to the honourable member, but we are committed to making sure that we retrofit as well as new builds.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many Chelmsford residents have already switched to electric vehicles. Those who live in houses with driveways pay just 5% VAT when they charge their cars at home. But those who live in terraced houses, who are often less well off, have to pay 20% VAT when they use a commercial charger. I fully understand that tax is a matter for Treasury Ministers, but does my right honourable friend agree with me that if we could level out this tax, we could make electric vehicles more affordable to all people and thus help with our transition towards a lower carbon economy?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for her question. Of course, it's essential that as we make the transition, that we do so in a fair way, not least for those with less. We've committed to keeping the transition to electric vehicles affordable for consumers, and we support innovations for those without a home charger, such as cross-payment cable channels and peer-to-peer charging schemes. But the VAT issue is one which I know she will continue to raise, and as she rightly says, all taxes, including VAT reliefs, are kept under review by the Chancellor.
Samantha Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The hospitality sector is very important to Chester.
Talking to the Chester Business Improvement District this morning and following comments from Chef Gary Usher, it's clear that the damaging impact of sky-high energy bills is still being felt extremely significantly. What hope can the Minister offer to hard-pressed restaurateurs in Chester and across the country?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I am aware of the challenge that has been facing all of the industry. And in fact, I have ongoing talks with UK Hospitality as well as other groups. I mean, clearly there are things that we can do in terms of the blend and extend. And also one of the things we're doing is looking at the brokers and making sure that third-party intermediaries are doing their jobs correctly.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Driving down to Parliament, Madam Deputy Speaker, I passed through the petrol stations. In my constituency, it was 136.9, 137.9. However, going down the service stations, it was 164.9 and 167.9. This is a massive difference, which the public just won't tolerate and want something doing about. What's the government going to do?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Road fuel prices are down for a second consecutive month. Petrol prices are now at a level not seen since early October 2021, following our work to bring transparency to the markets. And today we launched the consultation which will require petrol stations to report real-time prices, and this will mean drivers can compare prices, get the best price deal, and prices will fall through greater competition.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm sorry to hear that the Secretary of State is ill. But I wonder, can the Minister explain why the Secretary of State has taken money from Michael Hintz, funder of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, an organisation that peddles climate science denial? And does he think that's appropriate?
Well, I apologise for the Secretary of State not being here, and I will write to the Honourable Lady promptly in answer to her question.
Dr. Therese Coffey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Transparency is really important in the development of the energy sector, and National Grid is refusing to publish its assessment of Bradwell as a potential landfall site for cables and interconnectors. Now, it must be logical to try and prioritise brownfield sites with existing connections to the electricity network. Will my honourable friend please require National Grid to fully publish their assessment so far?
Well, my right honourable friend, when she gets something which she thinks is important and needs to, doesn't let it go. And I think that message will go out clearly from this chamber. And I know that I will happily work with her to see if we can find a resolution to this and give her the information and insight that she requires.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Following the recent state visit from the Korean President, where he identified the nuclear sector as one of the key sectors for future collaboration in the UK-Korea trade deal, and the publication, albeit 2 years later than promised, of the Civil Nuclear Roadmap last week, could the Minister please detail what conversations are taking place with the Department for Business and Trade to maximise inward investment opportunities for the nuclear supply chain in Warrington North and across the UK?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for that question and for her support of our nuclear roadmap as published last week. We absolutely, as she knows, look forward to increasing the opportunities to cooperate with South Korea on civil nuclear, including on fuel supply chain safety, security, non-proliferation, decommissioning and the development of new reactors in both countries. And this will benefit jobs and the supply chain around the UK, but specifically where there is a strong history of a nuclear industry in her constituency, which I know she champions.
Nick Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the additional power supplies from the offshore wind farms, it's obviously creating the need for further pylons. Yet if we doubled the voltage on the power lines from 400 kV to 800 kV, we may not need this. This is what's used in China and in America and would stop the need for all these additional power lines running up and down the country. Will the department look into this?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I will. I think it would be useful for both of us if I write to him and set out the technical assessments and constraints and issues around this, because he makes an interesting point.
Nia Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the Government's finally committed to a carbon border adjustment mechanism to protect our energy-intensive industries from being undercut by imports made with dirtier energy or in more heavily polluting processes. But can the Minister explain why the Government is delaying this until 2027, when the EU is introducing equivalent legislation a whole year earlier? And will he speak urgently to ministerial colleagues about bringing this date forward, both to protect our industries and reduce our carbon footprint?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her support for the introduction of a carbon border adjustment mechanism. This is to make sure that we don't have, in the jargon, carbon leakage, where carbon costs imposed on companies here lead to that production simply going abroad with no betterment to the planet. It's His Majesty's Treasury who takes the lead on this particular policy, but I will make sure that her sentiments are passed on to my Treasury colleagues.
And final question, Elaine Saxby.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can my right honourable friend confirm that given all the questions of carbon accounting, sustainability and value for taxpayers' money, that this government will not be guaranteeing Drax billions more in subsidies?
Yeah. Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question, and as she knows, we will shortly be consulting on potential support arrangements to help facilitate the transition of large-scale biomass generation to power bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. Power bioenergy with carbon capture and storage could deliver negative emissions that support our climate change targets and the UK's energy security.
Thank you. That concludes questions, and we now proceed to